Good afternoon. My name's Jordan. We're live here at Sugar Creek Metro Park with Greg, our outdoor recreation specialist, and he'll be going over what layers to wear when you're out in cold weather. So we're happy to be out here today with this live presented by Subaru. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to Greg, and if you got any questions, feel free to ask.
What's up, everybody? So as Jordan had said, we're over here at Sugar Creek Metro Park. It is a perfect day to cover the topic of layering. And it can be broken down in a couple of simple ways. So when we're talking about layering, we're here to refine and tune your layering system to have a more enjoyable experience in your Metro Parks. So we'll break it down into the types of layers, some of the materials, and some of the price points I might touch on as well. And if you have any questions during this, just feel free to drop a question in the comment section and we'll get to it accordingly. So to start off, we're going to break it down into base layer, the mid layer, and then finally the shell. And there's some nuances about each of these, and I'll break those down. As you can see, I'm already kind of layered up currently, and I have technically two base layers on, and I have one mid-size layer, I guess you could say, or maybe a thicker base layer. But we'll start with the base layers. So you want to find materials that are generally going to be not cotton. Cotton is a great product, but it's best to be kept out of the outdoors when you're hiking around and stuff. It tends to capture a lot of moisture and saturate really easily, and then you tend to chafe, and then you don't dry out, and then you risk more exposure than necessary. So this first layer that I have on is a base layer by Patagonia. It's their Capilene base layer. It's really thin. It's a good insulator, and it wicks away moisture really well. I'm really comfortable just in this right now, in this temperature. But again, layering also tends to the person specifically. If you're somebody who runs kind of warm, then you might need just a couple of the base layer mixed with the mid layer. But another thing I want to point out about this base layer is paying attention to the seaming. So it's sewn in a way that's somewhat ergonomic, so it's not quite uncomfortable, and the seams don't rub you in an uncomfortable way when you're out on the trail hiking around. So moving into the mid layers, there is a lot of different things that you can qualify as a mid layer, and some as a base layer even. But for mid layers, that can be anything like fleece, or that can be a vest, and this is a fleece vest that I have here, or it could be a down vest, or it could be a down jacket. So, for example, I have my base layer long sleeve. I could combine that with my mid layer fleece, which is going to probably keep me comfortable right now, but again, you might have to put on an extra layer to keep you comfortable. A little bit more about mid layers. You could call this a mid layer. This is my Arc'teryx jacket here, and it is a synthetic fill, which is a good insulator primarily because it can get wet and still keep me warm. Now I'm going to pull out a couple of other examples in my pack to show you some other mid layers that just to kind of give you a breadth of what's out there, because some of this stuff is, we have a visitor in the distance. Some of this stuff has kind of a heavy price point, but not all of it does. Oh yeah, I forgot I packed this actually. So this is another really great base layer as well, and I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but this is fully polyester and a polypropylene mix. It kind of feels like spandex. It's a little bit stretchy. This is really great for running in cooler conditions too. So that's just touching on one other base layer. For getting back to the mid layers, we have a puffy, but it's a down vest, And this is a really, really great alternative for somebody who runs really warm. I myself like to have no sleeves and no restriction, but I like to keep my core warm because I tend to lose temperature there. Not super easy, but my extremities tend to stay pretty warm. So this is down fill. Down is feathers, and those feathers are really good insulating properties, and heat retention is unparalleled. The only issue with down is if it gets wet, you are more or less going to have a pretty miserable time out on the trail because it's really, really difficult to dry this stuff once it gets wet. And again,
in the last few years, they've come out with that hydrophobic down.
That's right. Awesome. So, and I was going to touch on that. Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Jordan. And there is new technology where they impregnate the down feathers. Like, see, I have a little feather right here. You probably can't see that very well. But they will use what's called encapsule technology. And there's some other innovative, like DWR coatings of feathers that keep the loft so you can be warm, but then it also keeps it from getting as wet. Not totally waterproof, but there are advances. But with that, obviously the price point goes up. This vest that I have here, this fleece mid-layer, it's an Orvis. It's probably about, I don't know, $60 to $70. And this Patagonia vest is anywhere from $150 to $200 and up, probably. It's been a while since I've looked at the price point on this, but down is automatically going to be more expensive. Now, there's several other modifications that you can have to these fleeces too. So your mid layer, I go with the vests usually, but I also brought one of my warmer mid layers, which is a little bit thicker. It's got kind of the alpaca weave, and it's really comfy on the inside here. It's a little bit thicker, not too thick though. But the big thing is when you're layering, you got to think about your points of entry to exposure. So with this fleece in particular, I got the quarter zip at the neck. So all this doesn't have a seam. So there's no wind that's going to get in through here. So this is going to be a lot more comfortable to wear in, say, your 20 to 30 degree temperature ranges. Where your 50 to 60 degree temperature ranges, you might get a full zip. But again, that's my comfort level. You may need this in 50 to 60 degree weather. It all depends on the person. But layering, dressing like an onion, is how you maintain comfort in exposure. Now, I wanted to bring this piece particularly because there are some combination layers that exist. This is a soft shell. Now, this is a combination of your somewhat shell material, which we'll get into here in a minute, but it's also got kind of the micro fleece inside, and then it's also got some aerated fabrics, like some meshes that make it a little more breathable, and then it's got really nice felt lined seams and collar and in the sleeves as well. Now, this is not fully waterproof, but when I first bought this, it did have a really nice DWR coating, but over time DWR tends to degrade and you need to use certain washing materials to preserve that. It does cost a little bit to maintain these types of jackets, but they are a really great investment, especially if you're into, rock climbing, or if you're into backpacking and you don't want to wear a lot of bulky layers and get sweaty in your shoulder areas and in your back and stuff like that. The soft shell is that really nice combination layer where you could just wear a base layer, and I could throw this on and I could hit the trail and I could be down to maybe 35, 40 degrees in this, hiking pretty steadily, or I could be in 55 degrees sitting, just outside enjoying the weather and wearing this and being completely comfortable. But But again, it varies. There's lots of options. So, moving out of the mid layers a bit. Oh, nope, I got one more. So, back to what I was saying about full-size jackets. So, for one more thing in mid layer here. This is a Sherpa synthetic fill jacket. Now, I chose this one specifically today because it's kind of a damp, kind of a rainy day, and it still has that really great loft that down does to a degree. This is a 700 fill with the synthetic fibers, but you see, when you're picking out some jackets like this, you want to go for things that are chambered really tightly, because then these chambers will be filled individually, and that's how you get loft power. So when we want to be insulated, we want something with higher loft. Now that changes between down and synthetic, along with the price point, but this is a really great jacket to keep me warm and also keep me from being wet. And if it does get wet, I don't want to do this, but I could toss this into the stream, shake it out, put it back on, and I would still be able to maintain warmth. Be a little uncomfortable at first, but it would eventually get warm. Again, there's the full sleeve thing going on. If it's a little bit colder, maybe in the 20s and below, I might wear something with full sleeves, and then also the hood is a great option. And I choose one with a little bit larger hood and a little bit larger size overall because it's cut for layering.
Let's say there is a whole bunch of rain or a whole lot of wind going on. What kind of layer would you put on next?
So, I'm glad you asked that, Jordan. The next layer, which is going to be your weatherproof, your ultimate, your capstone to the whole shebang here, you have what's known as the shell. Now, this is the bread and butter of layering. And the reason I'm saying this is because these are your kind of advanced tech fibers. We've moved from tech fibers for base layers, which is going to be your polyester, polypropylene, bamboo even, and merino wool. This also applies to socks. And now we're into the tech fibers that are a little bit more advanced. They allow water evaporation. They eliminate moisture retention. They also allow airspace, but they're also waterproof to a certain extent. So what I'm talking about right now is what's impregnated in this technology, which is Gore-Tex. So Gore-Tex is a really advanced product. There's some other ones out there. I think there's one called Neofill. That's another technology out there. I think Polar Tech is the one who coined that one. And no water will get in this. But you battle one thing with fibers like this: condensation. So although this will keep you protected from the elements and exposure on the outside because of this really nice fabric, the DWR coating and all that fancy technology, inside you have all these other layers, and your body and all these other layers are wicking away the moisture to a vapor barrier that's one way. So moisture won't get in, it can come out, but when you have a large amount of condensation that's evaporated from you into your coat, you now have been exposed to moisture. And it is not that fun on the trail when your jacket gets wet. But there are some nice features with your shells, such as pit zips, which make a tremendous change to your layering experience. So when I put this on, zip this up a little bit. If this were a jacket that didn't have pit zips and I spend all day on the trail and I unzip this, it's going to be probably soaked inside just from sweat and condensation. But you have these really nice features that are zippable, that allow air to flow and allow some of that moisture to escape. You can also have what's known as a vented back in your jackets. That changes the price point too. So in a shell like this one, with no pit zips and a vented back versus having these features, you're looking at a couple $100 difference. One, because it's more material that they use. Two, because it's how it is used in the field. So that's one really great thing about shells. They kind of top everything off. And then also, all these things that I've talked about, they apply below the waist too. So you have materials like your polyester, your polypropylene, your there's tons of them, spandex. It's all out there, and that goes to, that counts for long johns, underwear, socks even. For example, I like to wear really thin socks when I'm on the trail, but today I'm wearing two different socks. I'm actually wearing a liner sock and I'm wearing a dress sock. And I choose dress socks because more often than not, you're not paying the outdoor retail price, but you're getting a sock made of the same exact material as an outdoor retail liner sock. So $5 or $6 for a pair of, whatever dress sock from the store, might be a Walmart or something. It could be $10 to $12 for a pair at an outdoor retail store for a outdoor specific, made of the same material. But it's always good to go and explore your options when you're shopping for those sorts of things. Now, I wanted to show you these because these are really great. This kind of adds to the shell for the top portion of your body. Generally, when you're wearing a shell, it's allowing water to drain down your legs, and then your legs get really cold. So it's really nice to have something like these rain pants here. And what I like specifically about these is they zip all the way up to above the mid-thigh. So I can unzip these completely. I don't have to take any boots off. I don't have to do any of that fumbling and jumbling. If I get a flash storm out of nowhere, I can just unzip these all the way, slip them on, zip them all the way down, and I'm ready to go. I'm waterproof at that point. So that's the shell. And if I were to go out today, I'll go ahead and layer up real quick. It's a little bit chilly, but I think I would probably start with my base layer, which I have on. Not going to be taking that off. And then put on my fleece and zip that up. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask during this time. I'm just getting dressed here. Zip that up a little bit, and then I may throw on this jacket here, which I kind of started with. Now, this jacket does have a nice DWR coating, and it's insanely waterproof, but again, it's still designed to be a little bit loftier, so I'm not going to expose it to the elements 100%. Then I might throw on this jacket here, my shell, give that a zip, and I'm going to leave the pit zips opened because I want heat to escape, don't want sweat building up. And then if I wanted to, because we don't know how the weather's going to be for the rest of the day, I'll zip these up to mid-thigh without getting it stuck in the fabric and ripping it. And put these guys on.
And the nice thing is, like you talked about having those zippers on there, you can take those off if you got warm and then quickly put them on if it did rain.
Exactly.
And the same with all your other layers as well. If you're dressing like an onion, you could take those off, throw them in your bag, and if you got cold, throw another one on. If you got hot, take one off.
Exactly. So, gone through the whole process now. I've started with my base layer, worked my way up to my mid layers, and then I've got my shell. Now, I had a couple of other things tucked away that I wanted to show you just because you can enhance your experience as we shift into the colder season. Right now we're in that kind of weird mid-season change. So it can be kind of warm, it can be kind of cold and rainy and wet, as is with spring. You can get things like bandana, or now this is cotton, but I only brought this because I don't have my buff anymore. But you can get a buff or some type of neck gaiter that you can tie around your neck to create some more warmth there in sensitive areas, or you can pull it up around your face. Again, we're in the world of masks right now, so few and far between you'll run into somebody that doesn't have a way to cover their face. Those are a great tool for these mid-season changes getting into the colder months. I also want to point out that you want to care about one other thing: your head. So we're not there yet, but there's a couple of different versions of hats that you might want to consider when you are looking to protect yourself from exposure. So I have one of these nice little beanies here. It's kind of thin. You can see the difference. It's a little bit of a slouch beanie, so it can get really big and puffy, create more airspace, so it's not super hot. This is a good fall time beanie right now for me particularly. And then you have your wind resistant beanies that have this micro fleece lined in it. And I like the Poem beanies just because they're a lot of fun, but this is extremely warm. Sometimes even in the winter, like when I worked in the mountains, this was almost too hot for my head. But some people benefit from this, and micro fleece lined beanies are a really, really great staple for people who tend to get cold through their head and lose a lot of heat through their head. So those are just a few things about layering that I wanted to touch on. Again, if you have any questions while I tear down a little bit, feel free to drop one in the comments section. Oh, I guess I could bring up one more thing. Gloves. So, not going to be wearing these right now, but as the seasons change, it's important to think about your hands too. If you're somebody that has cold hands, you can get the liner gloves that are really thin, and those may be enough. I'm a mitten guy. My hands don't get super cold, but in the winter, I push it to the limit. When it's extremely cold, then I'll break out mittens because my hands aren't separated. They're all in one pocket, and they stay warm that way. So that's just an interesting little tip. You can even get liner mittens that are really nice too, but you lose that dexterity. So there's some trade-offs, but layering comes in a combination of ways, and if there aren't any questions, that's totally fine, and I've really enjoyed you guys watching this video here today. Jordan's been a tremendous help, and I'm excited to see you all out on the trail with your new gear.